Hello, 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 everyone. I am Pastor Cooper. I'm with the Faith Leaders Roundtable, and today we have a really special part two for you. I believe it was part two or part 1B, if you want to call it that way. But we did a video last week that really gave us an overview of the policing blueprint, something that our team has been working on to really get us to a place where we have better policing in our communities. And one of the leaders in that effort is Pastor Myra Brown. Many of y'all know her. If you're from Rochester, you've been in Rochester, you haven't been under a rock, you certainly know who she is. But she's been leading this effort with us. And we have her today, but not just her. We also do have members of our team who will be joining us a little bit later. So we are so grateful to have Pastor Myra Brown here with us today as our special member. We won't call her a special guest because she's part of us. So special member. And so welcome, Pastor Myra Brown.
Thank you so much. It's so good to be here with you. And I'm very excited to be talking about this new policing blueprint.
So before we get started, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes, so I am Pastor Myra Brown, and I'm the pastor of Spiritus Christi Church downtown. It's an independent Catholic church. And I came to Rochester when I was 4 years old. So this is home for me. I don't quite remember what happened at 4, but I am part of the Pastors Roundtable, and I'm also a member of the NAACP, the local chapter, and I'm just really grateful to be here.
Awesome. So now we want to talk about this policing blueprint that you have presented to the roundtable as well as many others. And we're trying to get support for, and actually not just support, we're trying to get it done. And so I want you to talk a little bit about that. I think you're going to share your screen because you have some information that you'd like to share. So why don't we do that and then just share with us in detail the information that you have for us today.
Okay, so really talking about a new policing blueprint. And we're going to talk about, in this first segment, the what. Okay, the what. What are we asking for? We're asking for the support and funding of a new policing blueprint so that we might become a new policing blueprint community, right? Because the way that we are providing law enforcement really is immoral and, from a practical sense, unsustainable. And so we really need a new policing blueprint because the one that we have been given, that we've been working from and operating from, is from 1819. And everybody knows, right, that in the era of 1800s, what was happening there is many of the decisions that were made were steeped in white supremacy ideology and racist thinking, particularly about Black and brown folks. And so Black people were not at the table when that blueprint in 1819 was being developed. The question that was being asked is, what do we do with Black and brown folks who are now, out in the world, and how do we attend to white anxiety, protect white property and wealth? And so that is really not the definition of public safety. And so we need a new policing blueprint that actually gets us to authentic work of public safety for all people, not just white people when they're anxious or filled with anxiety.
So that's why when there's an uprise, it seems like the police do more to protect property than they do to protect people.
That's exactly right. And that's because an 1819 blueprint, it actually ascribes that. Like, that is its function, that is its purpose. And it really only sees the humanity and the dignity of white people, particularly when they're anxious, right? When they have white anxiety. And so Black and brown people will never be safe with an 1819 blueprint. And if you look across the country, we're not. We're not safe here in Rochester, and we're not safe in other cities where these policing blueprints were designed in 1819 during a time where, it was very common, right, to have white supremacy ideologies and frameworks and patterns of thinking, particularly around Black and brown folks in the world. And so we are one of those cities who have been impacted by that. And so we're calling for the Pastors Roundtable and for the city of Rochester, for city council to really support a redesign, right? So this talk about reimagining policing, we really do need to reimagine it and redesign it as well. So there are really 8 points to a new policing blueprint, right? Um, The first is that a new policing blueprint will help us to acknowledge what we have, which is kind of what I said, right? So in 1819, the blueprint for policing was really patterned after slave patrols, right? It dehumanizes, it criminalizes extreme vulnerability. It's created an incarceration, a trauma, an accountability crisis in communities of color. It's reinforced white supremacy patterns in criminal justice that treat Black and Brown circumstances as punishable events, to surveil, to control, right, to contain, to monitor. So it's all of the over policing and the excessive force and all those things that Black and Brown folks are saying, hey, this is happening to me. There's a reason for that because it is coming directly flowing from an 1819 policing blueprint that we need to end, right? It's not useful to us. Number two, a new policing blueprint will assert what we need, right? And so we need a new one based on the right questions. So the wrong question was, what do we do with these Black and Brown folks who are now being released from slavery? People who were freed Blacks, or people who bought their freedom, or people who were released by their enslavers. And so they were asking the wrong question, and it matters what question you ask. If you ask the wrong question, you'll get the wrong answer, right? And we got the wrong answer because policing answered that question around white anxiety and how do we protect white wealth and property. But the right question, which a new policing blueprint will help us to work from, is how do we get to public safety and a thriving community? How do we get to public safety and a thriving community? Right? And so that's the question that we want to start with for a new policing design, right? And so if we do that, then we will get the right policing blueprint, one that will decriminalize Black and Brown folks and not criminalize them because of their race, one that will invest in community solutions to improve outcomes, one that will create congruency, right, with its mission of justice. Right now, we use the language of having a criminal justice system, but it's a system that is incongruent with that statement because it actually commits lots of injustice towards people of color and in people of color communities. And so this really is an opportunity to be more congruent to what the mission of public safety is. It also will name systemic violence in policing as a pattern crime. And this is really important, right? Because the policing philosophy has traditionally been that, swift consequences is what kind of deters recidivism, right? And repeat offenses. And so systemic violence in policing is a pattern crime like any other crime. And so a new policing blueprint actually will broaden the definition of violence. And when you broaden the definition beyond just, what citizens do to each other, right? That's one level of violence, but it isn't all of it. There's also systemic violence. Those who have been charged with keeping us safe and being public safety practitioners who fail in doing that because they have been caught in this 1819 blueprint that allows them to commit systemic violence against people based on their race and their class. And so if you broaden the definition of violence, and then you broaden the available possible solutions. And that's really exciting, right? We can fix this. Number four, a new policing blueprint will address impact, right? We have intention and then we have impact, right? And we've learned that impact really is where we need to focus our attention. And so, it will address the impact of trauma that this new policing blueprint has left in impacted communities of color for really generations, right? Generations of trauma. It will impact the racialized systemic violence that is embedded in it, right? We can get rid of that, right? It will address economic insecurity, which is an outproduct, right, of the current policing blueprint. You know, we don't invest in the ways that we need to in communities of color so that we can actually make sure that we are having and we're building a thriving community. And
Hmm.
so this new policing blueprint gives us those options, right, of reallocating funds and supporting a community so that we actually see a reduction in the levels of crime committed, and you give a community more options. And so that's exciting. Number five, using blueprint as we proposed it, it puts shared control and resources back into the hands of the community. And this is really important. You know, activists have told us, you know, the defund, refund, which simply means, right, reallocating policing funds, you know, as a redress to the harm that is done and moving those funds into communities of color through a community chest and resourcing um, communities of color, right? And so that we can make those decisions and attend to the issues that are happening in the community because we are seated there culturally. We have an understanding of what the problem is. We have the ability and the skill set and all those things to be able to address the needs in our community. And so it's really important to have a policing blueprint that does both, that allows shared control and resources back into the community. Again, right? People of color need to be at the table of decision making.
Right.
A good friend said that if you are not at the table, then you are on the menu. And we have been on the menu for way too long, right? And so we need a new policing blueprint. And it honors the principle of subsidiarity, right? To have decisions made at the level where there is the most direct impact. And so we know that that is something that we really need to be doing. And so the process that this new policing blueprint proposes is really bringing a large swath of community members together that care about public safety and that have expressed an investment in it, to redesign a new policing blueprint, a 21st century one, not an 1819 one, right? And so we're thinking about people like the Police Accountability Board, right? The folks from the Race Commission, activists in the community, right? The religious leaders in the community, politicians, right, who have some impact and have some control over the laws that are put forth and crafted. Citizens who've been impacted by the system themselves, who have some insight, right, around what needs to change. Special interest groups, right, who again, who have some interest in seeing things better than they are currently.
Yes.
And retired officers, right? Those who have enough distance from the system, you know, they have some institutional knowledge that they can bring to the table, but they're not so wedded to a system that is broken and that isn't working and that is inequitable, that they can't be at the table to help redesign and do the work. And so I think, you know, that's kind of the group, right, that we're thinking of that could really come to the table and redesign a new policing blueprint, a new blueprint for public safety. Number six, a new policing blueprint will help us to, again, here's that shared control piece, right? We get to redefine roles, right? Maybe even redefine titles. And so I actually like public safety practitioner over police officer, right? It just has a better sound and it focuses the work and it has built-in accountability, right? If I'm a public safety practitioner and I don't practice public safety, then you know exactly how to hold me accountable, right? If I'm just a police, I just see myself as policing you, whatever that means, right? And so a new policing blueprint really gives us some room to redefine definitions, to redefine roles, to redefine the mission, the vision of public safety, right? To redefine partnership agreements. You know, how do we want the district attorney's office to interact with a new policing blueprint, right? How do we want the police union to interact, right, with a new policing blueprint? Because those old attachments will not work necessarily with a new policing blueprint. So we really get a do-over, right? We get a restart, which is just very exciting. How do we want the 911 communication system to interact, right? Really, and we get to really create room for the best practice models. And that's what's exciting about a new policing blueprint. And then number 7, of course, is if we do this right, and I think that we will, um, it benefits our whole city, right? We can repair community police relationships, right? We can reduce city liability. You'll see lawsuits go down, right? People won't be suing the city because we will have fixed the blueprint, and we'll have a new policing blueprint, new policies, new practices that will flow from that will be more just, right, and more equitable. And so uh, it really is a win-win for the city. It will reduce crime levels, right? Because now we've also invested into communities of color through that community chest that I talked about earlier, right? People will have what they need, right? They will not be left in economic distress. We spend $97 million on public safety. Imagine what a portion of that would do in a community chest for communities of color to actually resource them, right, with what they need. And we've left those communities deprived, intentionally deprived, for way too long. And then we wonder why we're not getting the kind of progress, right, that we want to see. There is a reason for that, right? It will reduce court congestion, right? Your crime levels are going down. People are committing less crimes, right? They're getting what they need. They're not hitting the court system, in the ways that they are right now through this sort of inequitable model, right, of congestion. And so, even our court systems will benefit from that, right? It increases professionalism, right? And so, we talk about officers being a profession, but not under this 1819 blueprint. It actually allows officers to act very unprofessionally, and get away with it. And so, a new policing blueprint actually gets to define professional conduct, real professional conduct with accountability. It will also eradicate barriers for public safety practitioners that are currently being called police, right?
Mhm.
And there are these barriers right now. There's barriers to hiring, right? There are credit score barriers to hiring. There's consent decrees, where, there's a court order that 25% of RPD can be diverse. But the flip side of that is also it's saying that 75% of RPD needs to be white, right? And so there's a built into it a transparent preference for whiteness, right? And what that means for communities of color and how that keeps us from being safe and how it doesn't reflect the full diversity of our city. And so we really need a public safety model that really reflects the diversity of our city. And we don't have that right now. Um, and so it allows for rebuilding, as I said, community trust. And you can't really have public safety if the public doesn't trust you, right? And so, particularly in Black communities, we've had a string of 4 high-profile cases where Black people just were not safe. Daniel Prude was not safe under this 1819 policing blueprint, and he died and was killed on the streets. Um, the 9-year-old young Black child was not safe. She was pepper sprayed and handcuffed, right? Um, a Black mom, and her 3-year-old child were not safe. She was body slammed and pepper sprayed and had a tug of war happening between her and her baby with officers for an alleged accusation of stealing from a store, and it turns out she hadn't stolen anything. They ended up charging her with trespassing, not theft, right? So she was not safe. Her child was not safe. And then Tyshon Jones, a young man who was again in a mental health crisis, he was not safe. It ended up with him taking 3 bullets to the chest by RPD and 2 to the stomach. And so we really, I don't know how many people need to die or how many children need to be handcuffed and pepper sprayed, how many Black mothers need to be body slammed before we realize that we need a new policing blueprint and we need it now. And it is only then that it will allow for reforms to be effective. Only an effective blueprint can serve as a platform for reform success. And that is why we need to do this work. And we call on the city, and we call on city council, and we call on the city of Rochester to support a call for a new policing blueprint.
Yeah. So now you have a team. Well, first of all, we have the Faith Leaders Roundtable. Inside of the Faith Leaders Roundtable, there's a committee or a group that works specifically on the criminal justice aspect. And so we're going to bring them in shortly. But if you could introduce them, your team would be great, and then we'll switch right over and bring them into the Zoom here.
Yes. So first we have with me, I have Pastor Marty Harris, who is the pastor of St. Philip's Baptist Church. I have Pastor Cynthia Anderson with me on my committee. And I also have Pastor Roger Breelove, who is on the Criminal Justice Committee with me. And they've done just tremendous work with me looking at, this 1819 blueprint and the white supremacy patterns that are embedded in it, and developing a proposal for a new policing blueprint. So welcome to my team. So I'm going to stop and pause there and let my team kind of respond to you and talk about, what that means for you.
Pastor Myra, thank you. And I do appreciate you all working with me in my time factor being late. But I want to share when you mentioned about that we are operating on an 1819 blueprint. What stuck in my head is the fact that times have changed, and I don't wear certain clothes that I wore in 1900s or 1980s. We don't dress like that no more because we are in a new season, a new dispensation, a new time frame, and so we had to, change from what we're doing. I can't pastor my church the way the founding pastor pastored when he opened the church in 1972. We're just dealing with a different string of people. So I had to change the way that pastoring. So with everything, during time brings about a change. And it seemed like that this is the only thing that we have been stuck with and stuck with doing. And they expect us to be okay with it. It needs to change. It needs to change. It needs to change. And with the consideration of us at the table, and us meaning you, all of those, you that are watching us, you that are hearing this, your opinion matters. And this change have to take place. We cannot continue to operate in the season of 1819 because we're in the 21st century now. So that change needs to happen.
That's a great example. I keep thinking about the bell-bottom pants, right? We all wore those in the 80s. We're not wearing those now, right?
No. I like to also say, just kind of piggyback on what Pastor Harris said. It's a new season. And I think that we experienced that even from a ministerial standpoint when COVID hit, and we were. One of the things I was saying to our church is that the church had left the building, but we have not left this earth realm. So we had to do business a different way. And so if you have something in place since 1819, the young folks call it a dinosaur. I mean, I have a phone and then my kids, iPhone, but it was kind of old. I think it was a 5 or 6. And my daughter said, "Dad, you got to get something new. You got to do something new." And so that's the way it is. And because what happened, it wasn't working as efficient as it was before. So it's the same. It's the same principle. So the new phone, of course, it adds new features. So but the other thing is that when we dismantle this system, because that's what it's really about. I'm not, and I know I sound like a broken record, but I'm not down with the reform, because reform is just saying we're gonna keep the foundation that we have. We're just gonna add some different addendum. We're not talking about that, because you can add all you want to. If the foundation is the same, then it's still gonna be off. One of the things that happened, we built a church from the ground, so to speak. And I remember when they was laying the foundation, and I lived probably about 5 minutes away from the church. And I went over there like 1:30 in the morning, but they was pouring the foundation. And they had to do it, because if one little iota of that thing was off, the whole building was going to be off. And so this system has been off since 1819, and we're still trying to put things on it. It's not going to work.
That's right. That's exactly right. Excellent point. Pastor Cynthia?
Yes, ma'am. This tonight is wonderful. And I hope that the community will share, and really become involved in change. When you all were talking, Pastor Myra, I thought about the word evolve. We need to evolve. We have been complacent. And so being complacent means that we have a smug and cynical satisfaction with where we are. We've achieved, we've come to this place and we're comfortable. But right now we're saying we're not going to be comfortable anymore. We deserve to see a system mature. We deserve to see a system grow. We deserve to see a system evolve. We're not where we used to be. Things have changed. People have changed. Circumstances have changed. People's views have changed. We have taken a hit in our city that we're not used to. But we're declaring we're not going to sit down and allow this to become our norm. And so many have become complacent, pleased with this outdated 1819 system. And we're saying we're not going to be complacent. We're not going to be comfortable. Listen, change is very, very, very uncomfortable. As these pastors talked about a phone, I had, the Galaxy, and I thought, I did something great. And one day my daughter said, "Mom, I'm coming to get you. We're going to Verizon. You're upgrading to an iPhone." I was mad. I got the phone, spent all my money, got home and was dirt mad. And I declared for 2 weeks, I'm taking this phone back. I got 30 days. But the more I thought about it, Cynthia, you're complacent. The world is evolving. You just don't want to learn something different. This have a whole lot more to it. So this blueprint change has a whole lot more to it. People are going to have to be uncomfortable. We cannot afford to continue to stay where we are. We are saying we disapprove of what is happening to our families, what is happening in our city. This right here is set up, and it's a dangerous system we're living in. And we're saying now, while we have a chance and we can afford to make changes, let's not stay complacent with what's going on. Let's shift and cause this system to progress, to develop. Let's change it. Rip up the old. Sometimes, in cleaning a house, you got to just say out with the old and in with the new. I just moved. The hardest thing for me was to get rid of things that I had just become a hoarder with. I didn't need it. It wasn't helping me.
Right.
So I had to get rid of it to just enjoy it, but I had to change my mind.
Right. So true. So true.
So our city needs to change. We elected officials to make sure that we have public safety. We're not safe. That means something needs to be ripped up, dismantled, and something else needs to be put in there so we can live in our city in peace, sleep well at night, and know that the police are not going to run mayhem through our city because the system backs them up, give them the legal rights to do it. They go home, we go to the graveyard, we rally, we scream through the streets, we go to the judicial system, and the doors are shut because of an old system that nobody dares to go to that grave, pick it up, and say, no, we're bringing life to this one. We're not letting this one die. We're
I
giving,
love that.
giving
Yeah.
this one on the ventilator. All right. So allow us to put this system on the ventilator, and we're all around praying that God's mercy and grace will sustain and that this one will live. Y'all
Absolutely.
better make it free. So y'all better go ahead and talk.
Absolutely.
I love that. I love the
Absolutely.
idea of the upgrade, right? And needing to really change with the times, because that is exactly right. But here's the other thing, right? Is that our tax dollars are
Right?
paying for
Yeah.
public service, right? And so if we don't change the 1819 blueprint, we're actually paying for our own oppression.
Ah,
Right? We're paying for our own trauma, right? We're paying, right, for our own abuse. And that just doesn't make any sense. We don't have to do that, right?
No.
We can actually demand, right, that we actually craft something that doesn't abuse us, that we craft something, right, that doesn't oppress us, right? And so this is why this is necessary and exciting, right? We have to, it's essential to know where to go, right, in a new design. And we have an opportunity to be trendsetters, right?
Pastor Myra,
Yes, sir.
Pastor Anderson said something so profound that we're not safe. And what stuck
Yeah.
out in my mind, we're not safe from the people who are supposed to keep us safe.
That's exactly right.
That's
exactly
the crazy part. The folks that, like you said, that we are paying to keep us safe is who we're not safe from.
That's exactly right.
and they
Yeah.
need to understand.
And we deserve safety. That's why we have to redefine public safety, right? That's how we know that what we have right now is not defining real public safety. Because if it were, we would all be safe, right? Daniel Prude would have been safe on the street of Rochester. The 9-year-old child who was in mental distress would have been safe. The mother and her 3-year-old child would have been safe, right? And Tyshon Jones, who was just shot 3 times in the chest and twice in the stomach when he was in a mental health crisis. And you know, this system of public safety, right, made it not safe for him. Somehow he was expected to lay down his mental illness at the command of policing power. And so we need a new blueprint, really, that actually can keep us safe and really look at our social problems with some real solutions, right? That's going to actually help the communities that that we are living in and keep our people safe. So I love that. And so, you know, sometimes people say, well, you know, is this a real thing? You know, blueprints, absolutely, right? Blueprints actually help define the big picture, and you get a big picture, and then you start to develop policies and procedures, right, off of that big picture. And so, what we have right now is a direct line to an 1819 blueprint that is outdated. We're calling for the upgrade, and it is something that we can actually do, right? The police create blueprints all the time. All the time they do. For those of you who are listening to us and you want to check out some other blueprints, you can go to St. Paul, Minnesota's website, and you'll find the 2007 and 2010 policing blueprint that they created just to focus on domestic violence, right? If you go to the Justice Collaborative, they have come up with a blueprint for a safe and just America. And so blueprints are an absolute thing, right, for policing across the country. And in fact, policing answered the question, remember, of what to do with Black folks, Black and brown folks in the world, and how to attend to white anxiety. And that's why you're having Black and brown folks having the same trouble with policing systems across America, whether you live in Rochester or you live in Minnesota or you live in Louisiana or you live in Chicago. It doesn't matter. Like Black and brown folks are being harmed by these policing blueprints that were created in that era. And in Rochester, we're saying no more.
Right.
No more. We're
And-
done with that, right? We can do better. We will do better, and we
Amen.
demand that we do better. And so we need that new policing blueprint. Down in this presentation, there's this EPIC initiative. It's actually a reform piece that will work beautifully um, with a new policing blueprint. And it simply is an initiative that allows for police officers when they come upon a scene and they see an officer using excessive force and on a citizens, they call out the word epic, and the training allows the officer who is applying excessive force, he knows or she knows to release that person, step back, and somebody else steps in, right? And so it builds in some level of accountability, but it will only do that if you have the right blueprint for
I love
public safety.
Yes, sir.
Pastor Myra,
Yes.
when our city and our elected officials and our boards, the police department, really understand that they must get ready for a metamorphosis, a ripping away, a changing the very nature and the very form of what we've done all of these years. We've been functioning on crutches, right? This old system. It's time to rip it away. Those people are dead and gone. And we are held prisoners to the old system. This is
That's
great.
exactly right. Especially since the data does not bear out. You know, the assumption is that people of color are committing more crimes, and so they need more policing. And that's not true. The data doesn't bear that out. In fact, Rochester, we have many more police policing our communities, our urban centers, than most cities our size. So, in fact, we are actually overstocked with police, considering the size of our city and the types of crimes that are happening here. The majority of our crimes are really misdemeanors. And so, and many of those can be mitigated by attending to the social issues, right, that are behind many of those kinds of crimes. And so, you're absolutely right that this 1819 blueprint has to go, right? And it is a failed blueprint. The mandate of it is flawed, right? It provides a failure in producing outcomes of what police are given to do. Like they're not even being successful in solving the crimes, right? Violent crimes in which they've been given to do, right? Because this policing blueprint allows them to sort of go out and do all of this harm to Black and brown bodies, as opposed to really focusing on the real work of attending to the kinds of crimes that they are the most useful for. And so law enforcement in and of itself under an 1819 blueprint is just steeped in white supremacist ideology. It's steeped in systemic racism, and it's steeped in strategies that don't keep us safe. And I don't know, about them, but I would not want, if I were an officer, to work in a system like that. I would not want to work in a blueprint that requires that I uphold white supremacist ideology in the way in which I do my work. And so a new blueprint will really end that dehumanization. It will rehumanize public safety. It will rehumanize citizens in Rochester who are actually paying for public safety. It will interrupt the incarceration crisis that has been created in communities of color. It will interrupt, the harm that's being done and the trauma. It'll establish accountability for police abuse and excessive uses of force and the killing of people of color that is steeped in white supremacy patterns. And it'll ask the right questions and it'll get the right answers. and the right results for defining public safety and building thriving communities. And I think we will all benefit from that. People often say to me, well, what about, isn't it just about bad cops? And what about the good cops? And this really isn't about good or bad cops. It's about a system, right? A system that will turn a good cop just like it will unleash a bad one. And so even police and public safety practitioners, right, will benefit from a new policing blueprint because then they don't have to work from a place of dualism, right? Hoping that that they won't be socialized by the ideologies and the philosophy of this failed blueprint that they're currently working on. And so we have a chance to get away from it, really. We really have a chance to get away from it and do better
Yeah.
and really
Yes,
create.
Pastor Meyer, I agree wholeheartedly, because one of the other things is that, so it's not even as much the training as it is how they think and how they actually see us. And so it's one of the things that's so important, and even speaking to our community, however you see a person really will determine what you receive from the person. So if their mindset toward us, and I think about actually the central, I think it was the central part 5. I think some came out when they see us, how do they see us? That becomes so important. So if you're seeing us from this 1819 blueprint, if you're seeing us like that, and then this is the 21st century, that's going to determine how you really treat me. So when we come forth with a new training blueprint, the whole attitude is changing. We're at the table. All of us are putting something together, making decisions. And now, so when that individual comes, that police officer comes, he knows that this is the mindset of our policy now versus just understanding that whatever I do, I'll be able to get through this thing because of the system that's already in place. This system is in place, number one, to protect me. And it's not about protecting, your job is not to protect yourself, so to speak. Your number one job is to make our community safe. And that's what it's all about.
No, that's very good. You're so absolutely right. Recently I had an encounter, an email with a police officer, a man who emailed me and said he'd been in law enforcement, right, for 23 years. Um, and he was very upset that we were calling for a new policing blueprint and that we were calling out the white supremacy patterns that killed Daniel Pruden, that killed Tyshon Jones. And so he asked me a question like, what would you do? What would you have done differently? And so I listed some things, right? Of things that I would have done differently. And they were very reasonable things, right? You should have a plan, right? If you get a call and you know it's a mental health call, right? You should have a plan before you show up and just kind of see how it goes. Like, that's not public safety, right? Um, and so we've seen police in this community use pepper spray inappropriately when you have somebody in mental health crisis, like Tyshon Jones. It would have been appropriate to use pepper spray if he had a knife with him because it would have made sure that everybody went home that night. He could have gone to the hospital to get his help, and the officer could have gone home right safely to his family. And so when I had this exchange with the officer, he eventually went to a deeply racist place. He said that he called them words of hate, and he said that that they were straight from the jungles of Africa. He said to me that that my people want something for nothing, that we're not satisfied. Here we had somebody in the highest level in the country, and I think he's talking about Barack Obama, and that still we were not satisfied. He said that we were complaining. Of course, he used an expletive, the B word. We were being and complaining because we weren't satisfied, and that we want something for nothing without working for it, right? So there's that old, Black people are lazy, right? You don't have a good work ethic, right? And then he said that I should go to a Black Lives Matter protest, hate America some more, and don't forget to get my benefits when I go there. So this whole idea that I'm some kind of welfare queen, right? That and these ideas were his ideas, right?
Mhm.
These were his white supremacy patterns of
Right.
thinking about Black and brown folks. And somebody gave him a job for 23 years, right? To be on the streets, um,
Okay.
doing public safety,
Yeah.
right? In Black and brown communities.
Right.
And so causing harm to people. So what I said to him is, you know what? Those white supremacy patterns of thinking, you shouldn't be in law enforcement. And in fact, you should resign because you Black and brown folks are not safe with you with that kind of thinking, right?
Exactly.
But that kind of thinking that he had could be directly drawn back to an 1819 slave
Mhm.
patrol blue
Absolutely.
understanding of policing,
Yeah.
right?
Pastor
And so
Mara,
with a
I'm
yes.
sorry. I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead. Go ahead. Finish your statement. I just wanted to say something.
Yes, so I said that it goes back to this 1819 blueprint of policing in terms of permissions, right? In terms of entitlement to
Mhm.
say those things, to think those things, and then ultimately, when he's on the streets, when given a situation where there's white anxiety, to act on those things. And
Mhm.
in each case, Black and brown people lose. So
Mhm.
we need a new policing blueprint.
Yeah. See, and my concern is that policy won't change that mentality. You know, those people they got to be rooted out and then
Right.
bring new people because you're not going to change his heart with policy. Only God can do that.
That's
And
right.
so it seems to me like we need a mechanism to get rid of these bad cops. And the people on the street know who they are.
Yeah.
They have a reputation. They know who they are. There's roughly 750 police officers. You know, there's probably a lot of really good ones, but we're tortured by the few bad ones.
Come on
That have to
now.
go. The other thing is
Yep.
these police officers that are policing our cities are not people from the city. They're people from the rural suburbs that drive in to police us. And it's not, they're not policing us. Their objective is to control Black people
Right.
and then go back to wherever they were. And you're correct, they don't see us as people because
Right.
they don't have a relationship with us. They're
Right.
just here to control us.
Mhm. Mhm.
And like I said, policy is not going to change that.
But
We got to get rid of
I-
those
Gotta
people.
weed them out.
you know, Pastor Cooper, I agree that policy won't change it. But the only way that I think that the reason that we are attacking them from a standpoint of policy is because they're gonna want to see something in black and white. So when the policy is in place, just like this 1819 policy is in place, and they're always referring back to it. So what we'll do, we have to learn how to play the game like they play. And what they do. So I agree wholeheartedly from a standpoint of policy and the way a person actually sees me. So our thing is that, listen, we know you really don't care for us, but that's okay. We're not going anywhere. And if you think that, oh, by the way, if you think that you're going to continue to be the majority, that's that dog won't hunt either. And so so the reason that they're in the place that they are in this particular season is because they see black and brown people definitely as a threat. They believe that if we ever get in authority, then we will treat them the same way in which they treated us forever in a day. And you know what? And I'm not going to say unfortunately, but I'm just going to say we would not do that. We have, and what you get back to what you just say, we have a different heart altogether. So we're just saying, I don't want anything from you. I just want the playing field to be level, and I want to be treated just like I'm treating you.
And the places that I serve, and as management, we all have to, in businesses, have policies and procedures in place.
Right.
And one of the policy that is spelled out in every place of employment is called a policy of equal opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And when we talk about policy, and we look at this blueprint, Black and brown people don't have equal opportunity when it comes to this blueprint. We're not treated fairly. We are not treated. We're not policed, or we're not serviced like the white folks are serviced.
Yeah.
This is not meant for us. This particular blueprint that's in place, it's not meant to give us a even playing field as the white folks. We are at a disadvantage. Once the police approaches us, we are already at a disadvantage because of how we look, based upon this blueprint. And this is why this policy has to change. This procedure has to change. This blueprint has to change so that we can be treated fairly. We're not asking for favors. We just want to be treated fairly. We're not asking for nothing special. We just want an even playing field, be on the equal opportunity. That's all. See us as people like you see everyone else, like you see the white folks. And I hate to be so blunt, but that's how it is. And this is what we're asking for.
And can I say something? They're not just going after the criminals. We are Christians in churches, reared our families in Christendom. But yet we have horror stories. Whenever the police have been called, it doesn't pan out with the vision in your mind. I'm going to call the police for this. They're going to come in and fight for right, and we're going to be able to be all right. When they come, one of the times they came for a neighbor, I made the phone call because at that point, my family was now unsafe. Instead of my family fighting a battle because we're Christians, my alternative was, let's call the police. When the police came, they went to the other house, the Caucasian's house. I said to the officer, but I made the phone call. He said, you stay on your porch. It resulted in my daughter being thrown in a police car. We didn't do anything. My other children screaming and crying because they don't know what the police is getting ready to do to my daughter that is in the car screaming, I can't breathe. I can't breathe isn't new. It's, my daughter that didn't do anything, reared and raised in the church, didn't cuss, didn't do anything, didn't threaten anybody. It was the fault of my neighbor who brought terror to my family. And we thought that the police would make us feel safe, but they harmed us. They terrorized us. We have to rip up the whole system and make police accountable to their assignment. We talk in the church that say, listen, a title doesn't make you, you make the title. If you want to carry the name of Rochester Police Department, public safety, then you must do what we need you to do. And that is not to come and discriminate. That is not to project your anger, your childhood, your experience, your fears about the color of our skin.
Exactly.
It is not for you to come to our homes, to jobs, wherever you are caught, but mental hygiene situations, and come and lord over these people, take matters in your own hand and kill our culture. It's not okay anymore. We're not going to go home. We're not going to be quiet. We're going to make noise and demand. I love the word tonight. That we are simply demanding. All of us are leaders in the city, upstanding leaders in this city, reputable. We take care of congregations. We teach them how to be upstanding, law-abiding citizens. We teach them how to respect the officers, right? Now the officers must be trained. Well, should I say retrained? We need policy. We need uprooting bad cops out. We need all of it. One without the other is not productive anymore. We got to get those. I mean, there's horror stories for days. And like I said, it's one thing if somebody is killing somebody or robbing somebody or starting fires, but the Christians, we got stories of injustice, of discrimination, of exerting harm, just brutality, ridiculous, saying things. It's not okay to terrorize a 3-year-old, see her mother thrown to the ground. There's no rhyme or reason. The child's 3. It's not all right to pepper spray a 9-year-old and justify it. It's not all right to have a naked man in the cold. It's not all right. And not only was that family terrorized, but the world that saw it. We're making national news from the people that's supposed to protect us. That we should be saying, man, we got the best police system. But right now, the whole world know, Rochester is in trouble. So thank you, Pastor Myra. Thank you, Ken, for having a heart to dismantle what has screwed us up for years.
Yeah, we're just about out of time. So we can go around. If there's any final thoughts that you all want to share before we close out, I want to give you all an opportunity to do that. And so Pastor Myra, I want to come to you last, but I want to start with Pastor Harris. Any final words or thoughts that you want to make sure that you communicate today?
I just want to say that, again, change begins with making this happen. We have to do it. We have to do it. This is a matter of urgency, rather. We have to move with urgency and making it clear that this change have to happen. 1819, it has expired. The expiration date is up.
Yes.
And we now need to put in a new blueprint. Let's get it done.
Amen.
And Pastor Breedlove?
If Jesus made a statement, if you have done it to the least of these brothers of mine, you have done it unto me. So we may have not experienced it personally, but I know Dr. Anderson have some things, but if our community have, then we have. If our culture, which is African American, if they have, one of them have, then all of us have. And so my plea to our community tonight is that understand it may not have came to your door as of yet, but if we continue to live and don't stand up for what's right, then it'll be there.
Yeah, it's kind of like Martin Luther King said, injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere.
Amen.
I get it. And Pastor Anderson?
All I have to say is, the best for our world is that we have a hospital. You bring the sick to the hospital for the purpose of the sick to be well. So we've come and we brought you to our table to say our job is to make police accountable and our city well. Bless.
Amen. Amen.
Awesome. And Pastor Myra?
So what I would say is that we all know that it's not working, what we have now. And so let's fix it.
Amen.
Right? And so as we think about fixing it, I'm reminded that this is our moment to demand more of ourselves and more of our systems and more of our community and more of our leaders and those that we have been paying to keep us safe, to give us real public safety and a new policing blueprint. If we stand together to demand this and call for this, will get us there. It will help
Amen.
us to get out of 1819 and into
Amen.
2021.
Praise God.
Amen. Well, thank you, Pastor Myra Brown and Pastor Breedlove and Pastor Harris and Pastor Anderson for bringing this valuable information to our citizens of this great city. And if you would like to be involved, there will be an email that's going to come up on the screen just shortly. Send us an email. Let us know that you are in support. If you want more information, just send us an email to the email that you'll see, or you can put it down here in the chat and we'll make sure that we get back to you. So once again, thank you so much for joining us today. And we will be back next week with part 2. With part 2, where we'll be focusing on the why. So once again, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Pastor Cooper.
Thank you,
for providing us
Pastor
this
Cooper,
platform.
thank you so
Care
very much.
Rochester.